My 25th birthday dinner was supposed to be a celebration. My parents had invited a few relatives to a restaurant downtown. My older brother Jason, my aunt and uncle, and a couple of family friends. At first, everything seemed normal. Food arrived, drinks were poured, and everyone started talking about work, life, and the usual family updates. But birthdays in my family had always been a little uncomfortable, mostly because of the way my parents treated me compared to my brother. Jason had always been the favorite. Better gifts, more support, more attention. If he made a mistake, my parents said he was learning. If I made a mistake, it became a lecture about responsibility. Growing up, I often felt like I didn't quite belong in my own family. Still, I tried to keep the peace. So when my father stood up during dinner and raised his glass, I assumed he was about to give the usual birthday speech. To my youngest, he said with a small smile. Everyone lifted their glasses. But then he said something that made the entire table freeze. Well, technically the child we almost didn't keep. A few relatives laughed awkwardly. I frowned slightly. What does that mean? I asked. My father shrugged like it was a harmless joke. Well, he said, when you were born, things were tight financially. My mother chuckled beside him. So we joked that keeping you around helped our taxes. Then my father added the line that made my stomach drop. Honestly, we only kept you for the tax benefits. The table went quiet. My aunt looked shocked. Jason laughed nervously, like he wasn't sure if my father was serious. I sat there for a moment, trying to process what he had just said. Are you serious? I asked. My father waved his hand dismissively. Oh, relax. It's just a joke. But my mother didn't look like she was joking. She simply nodded and said, well, raising kids is expensive. Something about the way she said it made the room feel colder. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Jason leaned back in his chair and smirked. Guess you should be grateful, he said, without those tax credits. He shrugged. Who knows where you'd be? A few people at the table looked uncomfortable now. I slowly set my glass down on the table. For years I had ignored little comments like this. But hearing that on my 25th birthday was different. I reached into my jacket pocket because what my parents didn't know was that earlier that week I had received a document that made their tax benefit joke a lot more interesting. I slowly pulled a folded envelope from my jacket and placed it on the table. My father raised an eyebrow. What's that? A document I received earlier this week. I said calmly. Jason leaned forward slightly. What kind of document? Instead of answering right away, I slid the paper out of the envelope and unfolded it carefully. My mother watched with mild curiosity. What is this supposed to prove? She asked. I turned the paper so they could read the heading. At the very top were the words, Estate Notification. My father frowned. Estate. Yes, I said, my biological father's estate. The reaction around the table was immediate. My mother's expression stiffened. Jason looked confused. What are you talking about? He asked. I looked directly at my parents. Something you probably didn't expect. My father crossed his arms. Go on. I tapped the document with my finger. A few months ago, a law firm contacted me. About what? My mother asked quickly. About the man who was actually my biological father. The table fell silent because my parents had never told anyone that part of the story. Jason looked back and forth between us. Wait, what? I continued calmly. Apparently he passed away last year. My father's jaw tightened slightly, and he asked, and he left behind a fairly large estate. My mother tried to laugh it off. Well, good for him. I shook my head. No. Then I turned the document so everyone could see the final page. He left it to me. Jason leaned forward to read the number printed near the bottom. At first he didn't react. Then his eyes widened. Wait, is that? Yes, I said. My father grabbed the paper and stared at the amount. His face changed immediately. That can't be right, he muttered. It is. My mother looked over his shoulder. The moment she saw the number, her hand moved to her mouth. But that's millions, she whispered. I nodded. Yes. Jason stared at me. You're serious? Completely. The entire table had gone silent. Then I leaned back in my chair and looked calmly at my parents. So, I said, you might want to rethink that whole tax benefit speech. For several seconds, nobody at the table spoke. My father was still staring at the document like he expected the number to suddenly change. My mother slowly sat back in her chair, looking pale. Jason finally broke the silence. Wait, how much did you say this estate was worth? I didn't answer. Instead, I simply pointed to the number printed on the page. Jason leaned closer again, reading it more carefully this time. His eyes widened. That's over $8 million. A quiet murmur moved around the table. My aunt looked stunned. My uncle nearly dropped his fork. My father finally placed the document back on the table. This doesn't make sense, he said. It does, I replied calmly. My mother shook her head. But we never told him about you. I looked at her. Apparently he knew anyway. Jason frowned. So, some random guy you've never even met just left you millions? He wasn't random, I said. He was my biological father. The words hung in the air. My father cleared his throat. Well, even if that's true, he said slowly, money like that comes with complications. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of complications? Taxes, legal fees, estate issues. Jason nodded like he suddenly understood something. Yeah, he said. Stuff like that can eat up a lot of money. I almost smiled. Actually, I said, tapping the document again, that's already been handled. My father frowned. What do you mean? The estate lawyer explained everything. My mother leaned forward slightly, and according to the paperwork, I flipped to the final page and turned it toward them. The amount listed here is what I receive after all taxes and legal costs. My father stared at the number again. His expression had completely changed now. Gone was the casual confidence from earlier. My mother looked nervous. Well, that's wonderful news, she said awkwardly. Jason suddenly smiled. Yeah, he added quickly. That's actually amazing. I noticed the change in their tone immediately. Just an hour ago, my parents had joked about keeping me around for tax benefits. Now suddenly everyone looked much more interested in my future. My father leaned forward slightly. You know, he said carefully, family should support each other. I looked at him quietly. He continued, with an opportunity like this, it might be wise to get some advice. Advice? Yes, he said, from people who care about you. For a moment, I didn't respond. Then I gave a small smile, because the irony of that sentence was almost too perfect. That birthday dinner taught me something important. Sometimes the people who treat you like you have no value are the same ones who suddenly change when your situation improves. But respect shouldn't depend on money, status, or inheritance. It should exist from the beginning, because the real lesson that night wasn't about the millions I inherited. It was about realizing that your worth was never defined by the people who failed to see it.